it's not like recording as it's going to be episode now. I'm just like recording it, and whenever you want to start or whatever. But yeah, so like at work, what I do, because I have like 30-minute like break, like one section. I got 10-minute like bro, works funny as a Muslim, right? It's like because there's like a 10-minute like morning tea. It's like I don't want to have that morning tea because like I still got to pray like Dhuhr and Asr, so I kind of like leave those like 10 minutes to pray those two prayers, right? And so like I have an actual 30-minute break, and so like in that 15 minute, I try to like finish up with my food and eat then, and then the other 15 minutes like just read. So I read like
Gee.
I'm reading Orientalism then. It's pretty good, bro. Like you finish like 4 or 5 pages consistently over like 4 or 5 days in a week, you can get through like quite a bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
depending on what page, like some pages are like, whoa, you got to actually like sift through it and read it again and make notes. But
yeah, yeah. Gee, mashallah, Lion of the Ummah,
nah, bro,
spreading out his work breaks
nah,
for
it's pretty.
prayer and reading and getting knowledge, mashallah, bro. But I started reading Orientalism about 2 weeks ago as well. After the first chapter, it gets dense as like
Yeah,
he goes through the canonical books, the bibliothèque, and then Simon, whatever's the next phase, because there's these compendiums that define Orientalism in each 50 or 100 years or so. But yeah, I'm like page 50, 60. But I get what you mean. Some parts are really dense, super dense. Other parts it's a breeze. But it's like a rigorous academic work, I realized. Like you can't just read your usual 20 pages, 30 pages an hour, like novels and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. You can't. You gotta like some. But that's what like because Yasser did a class on reading. So I think the art of reading is like knowing what to skip over and not skip over, like gloss over, and knowing what to like, which pages are like gold and which ones you can like. You have to like unpack more because bro, like especially like with the Muslim experience, you need to like find examples and sort of see it in your own experience and sort of articulate that and also see it through what's been said on the page. Like I think with Orientalism, that's what like was happening personally. Like uh around the beginning, I think it was like page 20. Said talks about like Gramsci and
He does, yeah.
the point about we as humans are born, but we don't have, I guess, what the exact quote is. Like we don't have. I can articulate the point. Like the point was pretty much that there's a lot of historical things that define and make us who we are today. So like I don't know, whatever happened in Bangladesh and how it formed is, all that has created us and the situation that we're in, but we don't have that kind of knowledge when we're born. We're just born as we are. And so and that's like the self, right? And so to understand the self, you have to also unpack um the historicity of things that led you to what you are today, right? So I thought it was a really fascinating point as well, because like I think that there's like this identity crisis as well amongst like not just like Muslims, but like just other peoples of faith or people of color, especially like we see with the African American community. Obviously, like there's Muslims as well in their community, but like you can see those play out in that sense, and it makes you think about how much like we don't know and how much we have to know in order to understand our conditions and our material conditions as well. So I thought it was a really good point. And but the thing is, bro, it was like literally like one line. So like if I skipped through, I would have like not uncovered that point. But then that was really interesting point like to sit on.
Yeah, I can't recall that point because I remember when you mentioned Gramsci, he was talking about. He said he was indebted to Gramsci and his cultural hegemony. Like you understand how the knowledge in society shapes the people there. But yeah, I'll go back to it. But he says that about Gramsci and Foucault as well. Like he's using their work explicitly. So it's like a counterpoint to the whole people like anti-pomos, right? It's like Orientalism. Like the whole thesis is using Foucault and Gramsci's methodology to sort of uncover the biases, the discourse of the past to show how um, Muslims and non-Europeans have been represented in a particular way for centuries, millennia. So it's like it's with those tools, right? So it's like you wouldn't even know your own history unless it was because of that. Because Orientalism did that; it shifted the whole way history and sociology happens in the West. So people who are anti-Pomo or anti sort of like those particular scholars, they're anti-Said, therefore, and the only history they would really know is like, yeah, the British built railways and that helped India modernize. Then in complete like bootlicking, whitewashed imperial version of history, they wouldn't have any other access, right? Because the whole alternative way of knowing and sort of like being proud of your knowledge only comes after the 60s and 70s. It's literally because of Said. Um, but yeah, that's just something that I noticed as well there. That it's because of that that we're able to sort of understand our own history, capture it a different way, and all of that.
Yeah, like even I think the great thing is that him he brings examples and articulates examples throughout history where I guess representation of Islam was in a way where it didn't want to do it from the perspective of speaking truly about what Islam is and what Muslims are. Rather, it's doing it from a particular lens that seeks to for its own sort of benefit, in the sense of um, sort of raising up Christianity in a way and sort of reducing Islam to I don't know, some what do you call it, like a sort of deviant sect of Christianity, or a copycat version or something to that effect. And I think like not only just that, but the fact that we experience even today, because especially in like around the beginning pages, it was more so articulating the point about how the West has shaped um, the how the East looks and should look, and and it's like highlighting that point because even now we still have that, but people don't see it. Like especially I don't know, navigating like media, politics, this and that. It's like trying to depict the East in a certain way, and also saying that creating these binaries where it's like, okay, look at them, look at us. You know, they're behind, we're progressing, and it won't really look at the East for what it is, rather than it's created these binaries. And it's really interesting. Like I made a note about this as well, where Said talks about how there's so pretty much do you remember the point about the? I think it was like a farm area where it's like they've he's the I think it was like speaking from the perspective of the white man. It's like they've fenced off this kind of area and they've sort of seen it as this is the West and everything outside it is the East. But then he makes the point that it's like arbitrary lines sort of drawn up
Yeah,
instead.
it's completely arbitrary. Yeah, yeah, I remember that part.
You know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of neo-trads, bro. I made a note about that in my book when I was writing. Like the neo-traditionalists, like Muslims that are kind of portraying that, okay, this is where Islam is, like this is only Islamic knowledge, and everything outside of it is like un-Islam or un-Islamic. You get what I'm saying? Like when it comes to like this whole
Yeah, yeah.
um, division between certain social sciences and Islam, and where
Oh,
Islam
I got
fits
you.
in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought it was like there was a mirror kind of image there. So I made a note of that. I'm like, damn, this is good. I'm gonna use this
Mm.
knowledge.
So, just to clarify what neotrads are, because I think I'm a bit behind on the language. So neotrads are just the whole like traditionalist Sufi crowd who's trying to
Well, it doesn't have to
in
necessarily be
general,
Sufi. It can just
not
be like,
necessarily.
yeah, it could be like Salafi or Sufi, like just kind of like you know, the
I thought
kind
it
of
was
this.
the whole like sort of like start inception is with Sheikh Hamza and like white converts of 60s and 70s and like their sort of
There's that,
type
yeah, yeah. They would fall into that sort of camp as well,
neotrad.
especially
Yeah,
with
yeah.
like the comments.
Their followers would. Yeah, yeah.
But it's not limited to them either. There's like, you know, Salafis that can fall into that. It's just like, oh, you know, we have Islam and the fiqh, and
Oh, we
you
don't
know,
need
so
anything
what
else.
do we need? Yeah,
Ah, okay. So the dudes who are always like, this is what Islam is. Everything else is not relevant to Islam. Islam can find solutions to global problems from within its own discourse and own ideas. Is that what they say?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
as
yeah.
in, it's from the Quran and Sunnah that we find solutions to I don't know, global poverty. Is that their perspective?
Kind of, yeah, pretty much. Like anything, like I guess I don't know if, like how we deem like pomo homo, it's like anti that basically. Like any kind of academic ideas or anything of that persuasion, it's like they're very anti that.
See, the Salafi types do that in a dismissive way, like they won't even engage with the material. They'll be like, "Nah, this is not Islam. Islam doesn't need this because you can view everything through Islam, and it'll always have a solution to any problem." But the whole like traditionalist ilmi crowd, who's a bit more intellectually savvy, um, they do the same. I don't think they do the same thing. They're a bit different. They read certain texts or encountered certain ideas or no?
Do you mean the like the Sufi traditionist crowd
Yeah, yeah,
specifically?
yeah, yeah.
I think they would be nuanced about ideas to do because, like, we know, for example, I think they're really in tune with like more the philosophical tradition. I'm talking about from the perspective of like even like theology, because like
Gotcha.
Ashari theology kind of incorporates that kind of Greek metaphysics and philosophy,
True.
and they've utilized that. And so I think from that perspective, they're a bit more nuanced, for sure, because they'll look to like Ghazali and be like, okay, you know, all these ideas, and especially with the Kalam cosmological argument, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, we're a bit more sophisticated. Not to say the Salafis don't use it, but I don't know, Salafis kind of draw the line in the sand, saying like, oh, any kind of philosophical ideas is not needed, and what's the point of this? Which is, I guess, not,
Salafis, they draw the line as in they're not grounded in anything besides like Quran and Hadith, whereas the Sufi traditionalist crowd, at least they respect history and philosophy. They still have
yeah,
that general grounding. Do you get what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
But yeah, go on.
no, no, go on, go on.
But yeah, my whole thing was I think the Sufi traditionalist crowd, they are a bit more sophisticated when it comes to political discussions. But at the same time, like Seerah was saying on Clubhouse the other day, they don't, that like you said, they still close Islam off into a certain box. Like, this is Islam, this is the true way, and Islam is able to find solutions to every problem. I think Yassir's point a couple of days ago in Clubhouse was like, he doesn't respect any neo traditionalist who doesn't consider global material conditions. That's what he said. He said, if they don't look towards the fact that 60% of the world is living under $2 a day, then it's like then there's not much of value to it because they're not addressing the world. They're just closing themselves off as usual, like the Salafis do.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, because I think what happens is when we make this discussion, like for example, even I think the point is also that the way we approach Islam is also classist, in the sense of we me and you, like, alhamdulillah, decently, like, middle working class families, and going about life comfortably in some ways or another, not struggling to the kind of abject poverty kind of perspective, or even like the lowest rungs of society in Australian
Okay.
society.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. Go on,
we're
go
only
on.
seeing like Islam through a particular lens, whereas we know that through like the Seerah, and through Islam in general, where Rasulullah some kind of points towards, for example, like the material world that he sort of banished, or not banished, but he didn't really, he the material world just was something in his hands, but wasn't really something that he embodied in the absolute sense, right? It was more like he's giving away valleys and like huge amounts of wealth
Yeah, yeah.
to charity and
Like,
this and that,
he
and so
used it to bring people closer to Islam or to help them, but
yeah,
not for its own
or
sake.
even
Yeah,
for like military conquest specifically,
got
like
you.
he would literally like go into, like, I guess, the community and be like, who will donate, and Uthman radiallahu who would like give away so much money, right? And so like it was only very specific occasions where you needed money, right? But I guess from the own kind of personal, like, kind of wealth perspective, not to say it's haram, but it's to say that the way they had lived in society was just pretty much poverty in that sense, or they weren't, sort of scared of it. But I guess the way that we live now, it's almost like we're not even part of what the poorest of society go through. We're not even in it at all. And so it's like almost like we only see Islam through a sort of middle class perspective. And so we actually don't get the full picture in some sense. And we don't have that kind of lived experiences as well. Um,
Yeah, 100% for sure. So what I'm sort of gaining from that is that you're saying that for the Sufi traditionalist crowd, Islam becomes more of a intellectual exercise as opposed to the lived reality that the Prophet Prophet's time would have involved.
I don't like. I think the Sufi way is meant to be like living
It's meant to be, yeah, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but I guess perhaps not to say it's the norm for people who
yeah, yeah.
subscribe to the
Got you,
Sufi
got you.
tradition. But I think not even just sort of the Sufi crowd, but just in general, I think the way that we perceive Islam to be, we only see it from the kind of middle class kind of
Oh,
perspective.
in the
And I
West,
think,
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
because
Yeah,
especially as like Muslims in the West, like how we have uh, how our experiences, because of colonization, we had, a lot of us moved from Bangladesh or whoever to the West, and our sort of perspective has been like a more monetary, perspective, and so we don't even consider like capitalism as a form of ill to fight against. We're only trying to get up the corporate ladder. Does that make sense?
yeah,
It's like
yeah, for sure.
what purpose are we essentially serving if we don't really bring those issues to light at all? And like I talked to you about this as well, because I was in that room, and for me it's like, watching cricket and seeing, for example, because in Indian Premier League they're always talking about certain players that came from like poverty and somehow made it, and now they're making millions of bucks. Like, oh, look at this feel good story. But even in that, it sounds good, but then it's like, what happens is, to maintain the pitches for the cricket matches, they um they use like hundreds and gallons of water, like after every game, to like keep it, fresh. And so it's like, how can it be that, much disparity, where it's like, how many like villages could you feed with that amount of water, but it's going into freaking like dirt to like maintain for a cricket match, which people just make money off. So it's like, I guess the way that we view it is so skewed, because we've only kind of perceived it from middle kind of working class families, that we don't really see it from the perspective of, okay, wait a minute, like this is this big disparity that's going, like whose side should we be on? Does that make sense?
What do you mean? Whose side should we be on?
Because
As in,
we see
like,
it as like, we don't really like, as a Muslim community, we don't really bring it to light. Like, we don't address that. Like, why aren't we upset about that, right?
oh, got you. Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like I
It
think
happens.
the problem is it's treated as just a fact of life. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, there's poor people. Yeah, that's just the way it is, and it's really like it's a really sort of lazy understanding of the world. Like, no one goes any deeper than to say, "Oh, yeah, there's poor people." To look at it structurally and to think about what caused their poverty. Why is it that particular parts of the world are poor, and we live in one of the best cities to live in the world, right? Alhamdulillah, like we have that blessing, but it can be very short sighted. And I do agree that that sort of probably translates to how we view Islam. Um, but yeah, it's weird, like with the whole corporate climbing the corporate ladder and sort of focusing entirely on dunya thing. Like I didn't get it at first because I was in uni for like 6 7 years, but now I've been working for like 2 3 years. Like you sort of feel it, like the whole rush to like just compete in dunya. Because like alhamdulillah, I'm at a point where I will easily live with this income for the rest of my life, and there's a lot of people in Australian society that make a lot less than this and still raise kids and still live life. But there's still that anxiety to always get a higher paying role and move up. Do you get what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
like, why do I feel that? It's literally because I'm just comparing myself to the achievement level of others in the white collar industry and government, this and that. It's There's literally no need. Do you get what I mean? It's because societies define success like that. And also like the selective school culture as well. Like me and you both went, like it never goes away. Like like the dudes that like studied crazy hard for HSC, you see them now, and the same ones working 16 hours a day at some law firm, corporate, audit, whatever, banking, finance. Like it never goes away. That same hustle just lasts with them and sort of takes over their life. I don't know. It's sort of weird. Like I could never treat it like that. Even then, even though like my personality is totally opposed to that, I still have the anxiety of like, nah, should be working, you should be trying to get something better. But that's just the nature of the dunya, I guess. That's just how it is.
Yeah,
um, yeah, like I don't know how to overcome it. I don't think you can overcome it. It's just hardwired into us, I think.
yeah. I think that's no, that's really good insight in of itself because so I'm feeling like a similar thing, right? It's like you're on a certain salary and you just like, okay, you already have this picture of where people are at, and then you already have this picture of what you need in life, and it's like, okay, then I need to like make myself at this point uh earn this salary in order to get that, and mentally you're just sort of chasing it the whole time and you just get sucked into it. I'm like, it's not as bad because you have like Deen in Islam to abide by, and
That's true.
you
That's
don't you
true.
don't
Yeah,
get you don't
that's
get
true.
sucked into it like crazy hard. But yeah, bro, like especially like being selective school, going to a selective school and seeing old friends and what they're doing. Like I'm not like a lot of them are actually like I think most of my basically like I'd say even all my friends are somewhat like high up there in corporate doing something like pretty good, right? In banking sector, it could be like in a business analyst position, and or like earning like a lot of them have been working already like 4 or 5 years anyway, and they've
Yeah,
already
yeah,
like
yeah,
gone up the corporate ladder. But it's like that's all there is to life for them, which is kind of scary, right? It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
you're sort of being worked um, into. I don't know. You're just being worked away, and then it's like it's really interesting you brought that up because it kind of ties in with like I feel like the self help kind of industry thrives on that. So it's like okay, there's this work life culture that I need to get into and to do well in society and get all my sort of goals in check in terms of I don't know getting the right car and getting a big house. It's like how can I further that? And then all these like self help will comes into that equation in terms of trying to fulfill that role of getting your dreams. So I think you see a booming industry in that sense, and it's just like it never sort of goes away. It's just sort of there, and you just kind of it's kind of I think each to their own. It's not to say everyone does it. I know people that are like, okay, I just want this work and get by, but at the same time, I want like I don't know, have a family and take care of my
yeah.
family and focus. But it's,
Mm.
not everyone's the same, but you definitely do see an increased um, wave of people that are really like sucked into the kind of work life culture. Like some of it does give purpose, but I think for the most part, it's like a distraction as well. And some people just fall into it, and it's like they can't get out of it because they're already too sucked into it
Mm.
and they're already high up.
I feel like modern society has made your career the only arena for success. And you see the blokes who go full send on career, um, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day. That's all right, they're successful, but that's the only thing that they're performing at. And they're neglecting whatever else they're neglecting, I don't know, family, personal habits. Um, but at the same time, I feel like I don't think there's a problem with like people trying to be super successful and like be make a lot of money, as in like God probably knows there's a lot of guys and girls out there who are super successful at career but way more pious and religious than me. So they probably have the right balance, if you get what I
Yeah,
mean. But for the most part, you see it and it sort of like takes over people's lives at the expense of the important things, which is Islam, deen, family, um, your kids, community, all of that. Because think about our ancestors, right? Say my dad didn't come here from Bangladesh. I just lived there and grew up in the village. And there are people who are like shopkeepers there and they just sell like stuff at the bazaar for like 40, 50, 60 years their whole life. And they just make similar sort of income and the life passes by like that. As in, I think traditional and Islamic idea of making a career was very different. It was more so, this is to live, this is to get by. And then your life was sort of everything else, right? As in, there was so much more like the community and like, um, obviously religion is embedded in everything, right? But yeah, it's sort of, it's weird to think. And there's a hadith, right? I know Abdul Hakim Murad has mentioned this, that people who migrate will get what they chase. So if you have to move, like say people who are persecuted, like if you leave a place for the sake of Allah, then that's what you'll get. You'll be like, Allah will be right in front of you, and you'll get that in the hereafter. Whereas if you leave a place for the sake of dunya, that's all you'll get. You'll just get the dunya given to you and nothing else. It's pretty scary, not gonna lie, because it's like, obviously our parents' generation, they came for better dunya. Um, Obviously we don't want to judge their intentions and stuff, but if you come for dunya, then like obviously you're not coming in primarily for sake of like deen and religion. So maybe that would be reflected in the next generation, which is our generation. Like there'd be a complete lack of that because you just have kids who are just chasing dunya as well. It's a bit scary to think about, but I've heard that. I don't know if it's a hadith or a saying, but multiple places I've heard it, that if it's dunya that you seek, then it's dunya that'll get. But yeah, you probably come across it as well.
Yeah, I don't blame the older generation too much in the sense like they had no other option, especially bro. Like 1971, yeah, the Bengal famine after 1971. It's like how
True, true.
where else are you gonna do? Like I don't think it's like a bad
It's
thing
also
per
really
se.
complicated. Yeah, yeah. Because it's a very it's a very as in, I don't agree with what I said earlier. It's a very sort of like Islamist line, like, oh, you live your amazing pure Islamic societies there to come to this Western secular society. It's like, no, if you see Bangladesh, Pakistan, it's insanely corrupt. You can't make a decent living being an honest person there, and anyone that's like sort of Islamic is sort of like questioned and persecuted. So low key Islam is probably better practiced here, as a lot of people would say. So yeah, it's also a lot more multifaceted and complex like that. So yeah, you can't really judge.
Yeah, and I think even within that conversation, it's about the people at the time. Like for example, someone might be like Muslim and not practicing, and they come here and work their way up in society. Naturally, I think what happens is their whole way of raising a family is more geared towards making sure that they get up in the corporate world and make sure that they do well in education. It's very like dunya uh, centric and dunya oriented. And naturally, Islam, because we live in that kind of white society, right, where we know, right? So, for example, as Muslims, it's not like when in the corporate situation, they have drinks and they have get-togethers, and as Muslim, you can't attend that or do any other sort of activities, right? Or go to the bar and hang out. Which I've had that kind of situations before in the past, especially like Christmas parties and stuff. And naturally as a Muslim, you aren't able to partake in that, and so you can't actually go up the corporate ladder in that sense, right? However, in saying that, it's like if you're more white in your approach, if anything, if you like leave Islam at the door, it's so much easier for you to go up. If you're even like agnostic and atheist, it's so much easier to go up the corporate ladder. Like you don't have much morals, you can sell yourself for the company. It just becomes so much easier. But not to say I don't want to like um, sort of portray all companies like that. I know like it's not like every single company is like that, but in saying that, we see for like especially like in the big ones where it's very competitive, you see that kind of attitude. And so for us, it's like where does that leave Islam, right? It's sort of I don't know, like even in that, it's like where do you have that spirituality aspect, right? But then at the same time, it's like people can bring the example of historical analysis, like, oh, look, our ancestors probably worked to death in the farms or something by some landowner or whatever. It's like, is it as bad? So there's that kind of argument as well, which I get. But at the same time, it's like I think the kind of capitalist slash sort of white society kind of sucks you into a direction where it's like everyone has to like partake in it regard, and like there's no way out if anything.
Yeah, I feel like it can be a bit more complicated than that because I know several examples of guys who like memorize Quran, very practicing, but still very successful in the whether as a lawyer or
I
in
think we
corporate
both know.
world. Yeah, yeah.
Few
As
names
in,
come to mind.
as in, what really kills me is that you don't have to give up deen and your identity to succeed in those spaces. You can still make like 200K plus and be like directors and like bosses and stuff as a practicing Muslims. It's just like the worst part is for me, like curries who like go full whitewash to pursue that. It's like you don't have to give up your culture and identity and like totally like pretend you have nothing to do with the place you came from to succeed there. So I feel like that's like the worst. Like I this is not even a religious thing. It's more like a integrity and authenticity thing. Like, yeah, you see it. It's like that's the most common thing at a UNSW that like finance, whitewashed, pretends he's not Curry, like just has a different like as in will do anything to distance himself from his culture sort of thing. Um, as in we see a lot of those types of guys as well. And for me it's like, look, it's not even a matter of religion then, it's a matter of integrity. And you're just like totally trying to like erase yourself and your family and what you came from just to succeed in Combank or something.
Yeah,
It's like you don't need to do that, bro. Like you can just still like hold on to your like your integrity, sense of self, like appreciate your language, appreciate your culture, um, and then religions like on top of all that. Like that's a different question as well. Like because I've met a lot of people who are like maybe they're not religious, but they're still in touch with their their roots, if you get what I mean. They're not like full sellout to like white Australia, corporate Australia, this, that. There's different ways to go about it. It is complicated, but it definitely does make it easier. Like you said, if you just go out for drinks with everyone on Friday night, it helps your manager think of you highly. It helps your colleagues think of you highly as well because you're part of the group. But it's not even needed to succeed. So, but people still do that. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to it.
yeah. I think it is the thing that kind of white, because since we live in that sort of white society, like I was listening to another podcast where even in, for example, court situations where, for example, a police officer can pretty much get away with what they want. So in the context, for example, it's pretty common in America where there'll be like a group of like African American people, guys or girls or whoever. Mostly, I think in this context, like they were referring to guys specifically, and then the officer can just be like, "Oh, I smell weed on you," and then kind of interrogate them doing that, even though it's like there's no weed. So it's like, and since they're the stereotypical kind of image of African American person sort of doing weed and having drugs on them, they can kind of get away with it because in court it's like, yeah, I smell weed on them, and that's why it happened and this and that. So it's like, I guess the law isn't really sort of favoring um, certain minority communities, and this kind of ties into CRT a lot because CRT sort of discusses that as well. And so that's why like in CRT there's a like they develop a language to articulate those kind of situations. And we know in the Muslim community we've had this many times as well. Like we know in our Sydney community where uh Kamani Zamuddin was one example, just like someone called on him saying, oh yeah, like someone is planning to do a terrorist attack, and boom, he's in like jail straight away, right? No sort of like questioning or court proceedings or anything like that. It's just straight, yeah, jail, suspected terrorists. And we seen that kind of abuse of the system in a certain way. We see even in COVID as well now, like with the lockdown, like all these people like interrogated for when they shouldn't need to be, especially like in Western Sydney. So I think my point is more so like you don't have, I guess, it could be in corporate situations or even like when it comes to the law and in other ways, it's like it's not favoring like people like us. and it's like navigating that within society, which is like a huge task, right, in of itself. But yeah, like that's
Yeah,
like yeah.
yeah, I feel like with that, the whole Sydney lockdown thing. Yeah, it's sort of like it's super obvious. Like everyone knows it. If you live here, you grew up here, you know it. Like it's racist. It's targeting particular demographics who live in certain areas. Oh, bro, it's weird. Like low key, I fall into the Fairfield government area. So if alhamdulillah I work from home, but if I did work outside, I'd have to get tested every 3 days. Like that's just crazy. Like it just makes life so hard. But yeah. Um, because yeah, so you see a lot of it on Instagram. Everyone's posting nowadays. There's like the red rooster line. It's like if you there's a line where if you cross it, you're in like more disadvantaged part of Sydney. The other side of the line, it's like advantage, better schools, average income generally a lot higher. But yeah, there's a lot of a lot to say about that. But with the courts and the police, it's weird because like the I feel like policing as an institution is really corrupt. Like police are like hella racist. Like like Sydney police in the 1990s, there was like a major corruption scandal. Like the whole of the King's Cross police station was taking bribes from like drug dealers and stuff, and like it was like endemic, and that sort of still like lasts. Like um, it's weird because the courts, I feel like you have a shot at sort of proving your innocence, but it's the courts are racist as well. But it's like different institutions are racist, and there's like layers to it. It's like the police are super prejudiced, the courts are prejudiced. I don't know about in Kamara's case. See, Kamara's case, like it was the police who took him away, right, and acted on that information.
Yeah.
But he took it to the courts, and he was able to argue his case, and then the judge and jury obviously vindicated him. Like he was set free, and everything was false against him, and they found out it was totally something else. So
But even
yeah,
in that, what was frustrating is that because the media were quick to jump onto it and say like,
oh
"Oh,
sure,
this terrorist problem, this and that," and the police were like, "Oh yeah, we're acting on this straight away." But then when they got it wrong, right? Like they got it absolutely wrong, they can dissociate from it quickly and just be like, "Look, it was that guy, which was like Usman Khawaja's brother, who reported him, so it's his fault," and all the blame now, media is like the blame is all on him, but the media and the police can disassociate from it as if they
oh
don't
exactly,
have
good
any sort
point.
of
Yeah, yeah. Like,
accountability.
and they found another brown dude to put it on, which is
Yeah,
yeah, lucky for them, because yeah,
yeah.
because no spotlight on them and how they totally messed up. So yeah,
I think just to
yeah.
give context for Kamal Nizamuddin, like situation that happened in Sydney, for people who may not be aware, it's just sort of me and Josh had a friend in our MSA, and he was pretty much working at the uni, and he got reported in by someone else saying that he was planning to do a terrorist attack in Sydney, and had it all plans drawn up in his notebook, and this became like a crazy thing. It was like front page on the newspapers, and he got locked away straight away. But there was like no actual evidence, and then later they found out it was actually like another um, guy who framed him because he was jealous of him. So it's like, I guess what we're trying to analyze and unpack is like the Muslim experience in that, right? And I think it's not being done as widely because it's like, because you're a Muslim and because there's just this thing called like terrorism, and there's all kind of stereotypes attached with Muslims and terrorists. It's like you can quickly, they've made the laws in a way, it's like you can kind of lock up suspected terrorists straight away, and that's like damaging. Like because he had to like he doesn't live here anymore. He lives in Sri Lanka now. He had to like move away and stuff like
Yeah,
that. It's like really
alhamdulillah, he
damaging.
had somewhere else to go. He had like family and like everything established in Sri Lanka, so he could just go there. But yeah, it's yeah. The laws are specifically like you could be locked up without any conditions, without any bail or anything, if you're a
Yeah.
suspected terrorist. Like it's full on like that can happen to anyone if there's any reason for them to suspect.
And to unpack that further, which is an interesting discussion, is because like we had a while back. I don't know if you were in that talk, but like discussion panel with Uthman Badr, Yasser Morsi, and there was like a right wing dude from a think tank. He was on it, and essentially what happened was because I was moderating that panel. The one iconic moment I'll never forget. The right wing dude, he was just like, oh, he was just talking about like taking down like extremists and all that, and then he was just like randomly once, but if you saw the WhatsApp chats, you would know. I'm like, what the heck? Like it's like because he has access to like these screenshots of like WhatsApp messages and stuff like that, and so it's like, oh yeah, bro, but like the WhatsApp messages, bro. Like I'm like, what the heck? Like, what's this guy on about?
The
Like,
right wing dude said that.
yeah, yeah. He was trying to show that okay, this is like extremism problem, and we have to take him down. And so he was just like alluding to, oh yeah, but if you saw the screenshots and the WhatsApp messages, I'm like, okay, cool. And everyone just like laughed, I think, if I remember. But it's just like because we know, for example, even how through the white perspective, how people so firstly, like policy and lawmaking is like a whole thing in of itself where it's like it's only catering to I guess the white gaze in some ways because it's like when, for example, a non-Muslim uh for example, hears about the concept of jihad, right? It sounds like, oh my gosh, like they're shocked by it, and in some ways, and the aspects about Islam where we know it's fine, it's normal, right? I don't know, we joke about it even. To them, it's like something a bit shocking and you can't really talk about around them. You get what I'm saying? So it's like a lot of those aspects when we have non-Muslims read it and are actually ahead of organizations or these think tanks, extremist right-wing think tanks, it's like they will find more reasons for just ordinary Muslims like me and you to get like locked up for no reason because they may read into something of a message that isn't really there. Like if someone's joking, like I do it all the time, right? But to someone else reading it, they'll probably think, "Oh wow, like okay, wait, this guy might be extremist." Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, um, yeah. Like, I feel like, alhamdulillah, now it's a bit more chill. Like the Australian government isn't focusing as much on like terrorism and that. It's got its hands full with COVID and everything else. But back in the ISIS days, 2013, 14, 15, it was crazy. Like everyone was proper scared. Like you had to watch what you were saying. Anything you said publicly, like the Asia could approach you and give you a phone call. It happened to like a lot of guys I know through the HT scene because they were affiliated with ISIS, obviously in no way, shape, or form, but just because of the language they used, they were sort of hunted down by Asia, and they invite you to have a chat, and they offer you money to reveal further details. Like they act super friendly, right? But they try to slowly get in and get your trust and get you to reveal things which are incriminating, I guess. And then just like that, you could like face jail or throw your friends under the bus. But yeah, and yeah, bro, with the word like jihad, like it's crazy. Like I don't know why it's such a big issue. Like um like there's like three things that it can possibly mean. I remember like obviously like our good mentor Faraz, he broke it down for me one day because he was like, bro, this is what the word means. And that's all it can mean. And he was like fully clarified everything. But yeah, what do you call? There's obviously jihad of the nafs. It's like a general term which means struggle. Then there's jihad, which is protecting your homelands from invaders. And then, of course, there's jihad, which is expanding the Muslim state. And that can only happen with a khilafah and with a sanctioned leader, and you're militarily expanding the boundaries of Islam and being like, this is the caliphate, this is the Islamic polity. But and that sounds aggressive, right? But I'm like, you just got to have the attitude of, so what? I don't care. Like, so what? Like, look at every state throughout history. Look at the US and like dozens of nuclear military bases around the world and what it's trying to do, economically dominate the whole world. That's like worse than just expanding over land and ruling over people. It's like you're sucking people dry. Look at the British Empire, like literally enslaving 80% of the earth. It's crazy. Like expanding in general is like a normal thing that's always happened over the course of the world. The question is how you expand and how you treat the people that you go to. Um, like Rome was expansionist, and it like destroyed all the provinces, and like it was Rome's whole system was a system of extraction, everything to the center, and like every empire that's existed has been like bad, like it's had its bad elements as well as its good elements, I guess. But some were definitely worse. For example, just like with India, right? Like people try to compare the Muslims going to India and the British going to India, and you listen to any historian and they'll break it down for you. They're like, it's completely different. You can't compare it. The British going to India was like entirely extraction. Like everything they ever did there was to extract grains, minerals, resources entirely out of the country. Um, like the railways example I said, like all the railways in India are designed so that they lead to Mumbai, to the port, the easiest, so that the grains, resources that were produced in India, it could be shipped off to um, Britain as quickly as possible. And obviously, there were the famines in colonial India, sorry, and people literally starved to death as they watched like carriage loads of grain being taken away because it was the property of the British, right? Whereas with Islam coming to India, it's completely different. It's a like it's where one culture naturalized into another. Like Islamic India is like a pinnacle of civilization in some ways, like Mughal architecture, Mughal art, Mughal poetry, everything is sort of well renowned, and it's like you preside over the people that you rule as opposed to just extracting wealth away from it. Um, which is what the British did, and which is what the whole colonialism period was about. So you reinvest back into the society that you're ruling over. When taxes are collected, it's to improve the security of the highways so that there's less robbery and stuff. Do you get what I mean? Or to secure the trading routes for the benefit of the people of India. So yeah, there's like, because a lot of people try to compare it and say, oh, Muslims did the same thing. Oh, Muslims are just as expansionary and colonialist. Is like people who say that have clearly never read anything about what Muslims did, because Muslim rule was never the same as European rule. In some cases, obviously, there's the bad examples. I don't know, like you'd have to look into it. The Ottomans, for example, what they did in Eastern Europe. I don't know what the whole Janissary system and later on with Armenia. There's like a lot of dark elements to it, but if you look on the overall, Muslims expanded into places to live amongst the people. Um, but yeah, that's sort of like the whole perspective on that, which I think is important to recognize as well. Like, and for that, like that sort of really clarified jihad for me. Just realizing like, oh, militarily expanding isn't a bad thing, because it's not like it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that that's the way of the world. It's always happened. Like in the history of the world, cultures militarily expanding and taking over new lands. It's a matter of how they did it. Do they like wipe out entire populations like the Mongols, or do they extract all the resources, make countries into third world countries like Europe, or what do they do? So yeah, there's a lot of ways to view it.
Yeah, no, you bring a very good point, and you shed a lot of gems there, and that sort of reminds, like, you can take the conversation a lot of ways. However, for me, for example, even the rule of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, where there was like comments about how peaceful and like insane peace there was during his rule, and within that, the civilization he was able to build up. Not only that, we know the sort of even it was really fascinating. Like Rasul some sort of predicted the conquest of like places of Egypt and stuff like that, and we can see like the fruits of it now, right? Not as in like not. I'm not talking about the current context, but I'm talking about like Muslims living there and becoming like part of that land, right? And we can see the relationship of like Muslims throughout all these places where we've almost like I don't know if what's the right term, like homogenized in some ways, where we have become that place, and we've taken up the culture. So like Islam in Malaysia has very distinct kind of version of Islam. and its own kind of cultural representation compared to uh, Muslims in the subcontinent versus Muslims in even in Chechnya, for example, and all these other lands. We can see a sort of Islam where the people and they have their own culture, right? But then that's almost not to say that Muslim, expansion was perfect in history, because for some reason there's always this element, and it's always this Islamophobic aspect as well, where it's like, oh, just because a Muslim ruler did it, for some reason we have to agree to it. We can even disagree, can be like, no, that's wrong, like that's injustice, we have to fight against this injustice by this ruler, right? So it's not like we're bound to, like, for example, right, living in this current context, for some reason there's this whole idea that even like a lot of kind of, the moderate, like, kind of Western folks, just like they have to sort of, for some reason, always praise like the government, and in the sense of always agreeing to what the West does, and it's not that bad, and look, we have so many good things here. It's kind of that line of thinking. Whereas for some reason, I've had this like interaction. Sometimes it's like, oh, look at what Saudi. There's always this comparison randomly. You're like Saudi Arabia. Like, look, they don't even let the women drive there, even though they do now. But back then it was like, oh no, they don't even let them, drive. And you're just like, but I don't even like. Firstly, I'm not gonna fall into that kind of discourse of backwardness. It's kind of like Edward Said, right? Kind of
Yeah,
articulate,
bro.
but
If like say Muslims who didn't have Edward Said's discourse, they'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. We're backward. You guys are rational." As in, there's no resource to understand that dichotomy and binary of how Western people view us without Said's idea of the discourse they created of we're backwards, traditional, rigid, and non-rational, whereas they're modern, progressive, rational. So you would have no argument. You'd be like, "Yeah, I guess the West does have better science. Yeah, like you guys are better." Right? There's nothing you can say because from their framework, that's what's superior. So that's what produces the liberal, whitewashed coconut Muslims because they aspire to the standards of the West. They're like, yeah, like yeah, like they'll be like, yeah, you're right. Saudi Arabia is backwards. We have to make it more like Germany. Do you get what I mean? Whereas once you have the nuance, you'll be like, hold on a minute. It's like, why is a country like that? Like, why are you talking about it in that way, etc. But
yeah.
go on. What were you
Yeah,
saying?
like there's no, that's a really good point as well. But for even from like the Muslim perspective, it's not like I have to adhere everything to Saudi Arabia does. Why?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's like why are you why are you thinking of me and Saudi Arabia for all of a sudden? That's almost a
Just like,
reflection or a projection of what they think of you, us, if anything. It's like, oh, for some reason we are, Saudi Arabia, and walking around, and kind of that reductionist way of things, and reducing us to something. And it's like, firstly, I like, why is that their equivocation like that? It's like, yeah, I'm like, I disagree in some aspects, just as I disagree with things in the West as well.
yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? It's not like I can do both. Like, why are you stuck with, for some reason you have to support the West, and for some
yeah,
reason you
yeah.
have to like point out these things about Saudi Arabia? Like, it doesn't make sense, right?
Because we would, it's that would be an internal discussion for us. Would be like, it's not something we can explain to them. That's the internal conversation with us. Like, okay, so why is Saudi Arabia extremely staunch about things like this, and really, really rigid in their thinking? It's like, well, if you look 1700s, Abdul Wahab, less than Najdi Dawa, Salafi movement, and they have a certain understanding of Islam which is really black and white, and we can talk about that in our own theology and our own fiqh and everything, and sort of come to our understanding of that without being projected, without just taking on their projections and frameworks and be like, yeah, we're just backwards. You look at every other Muslim country like Turkey, Malaysia, this, that, women are in the workforce, working, driving, everything. So it's sort of like it doesn't hold up. So yeah, you could provide those counterexamples to them as well.
Yeah, exactly. And even like we're talking about historical aspects about Islam, we can just as much like disagree with certain, rules and their actions as well. It's not like we have to adhere to every single thing. So it's not like a Muslim ruler in a certain point of time is representative of, how Muslims should be and act and all that. So we have that sort of flexibility in that sense, in the sense of Islam and Muslims in historical contexts as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Just sort of understanding our history for ourselves as opposed to through the prism of Europe and how they project onto us all these ideas. But yeah, it's really hard to get into these discussions with like people in the workplace, this and that, or elsewhere. It's you really have to step back and go through their assumptions, everything.
Yeah, and that's
But
like a
yeah,
whole language in of itself, and that's what like you've seen academics kind of unpack that whole discourse, and I think it's really important as well to be able to do that because then we'll be able to understand the reality that we're in as well, and what we get subjected to at times, and how to like go about those situations and circumstances because you have that framing, and then you can see people, certain academics, sort of. Um, Frame the whole discussions through that prism or sphere of like orientalist thinking, and so it's like you have to like unpack that and kind of open up the layers, if that makes sense, especially like how Muslims should behave or what Muslims are, what they are, um, and especially of Muslims in our current context as well. I think even like for example you talked about colonization and jihad and all that, but even with, it's like the West is already doing that to that degree, but for some reason it's like normalized in some ways. It's not like, not many are like the normal everyday kind of white guy isn't like outraged about it. It's like, because I've experienced it as well, like especially with COVID situations, because they live in that kind of reality where it's like, oh, the government is always doing the best for us, and you know, so it's like they'll try to justify everything. It's like, oh yeah, look, they have the stats, that's why they're doing this, and they have this and that, but they don't understand the racism that also goes about in the process as well.
yeah, for sure, for sure. There's a lot to be said. Um, but yeah, definitely the main thing is to peel back those assumptions about who we are. That that's a lot of the hard work. That's why you can't really ever engage in conversation with these like people who have all these assumptions about what Muslims are in their head. Bro, Edward Said said this in the book. Like he said, it doesn't matter what we actually are. It's the West has an imagination of what Muslims are, and it's that imagination that is stronger than anything in how they imagine us. It's like a whole imaginative landscape of like, oh, the East is this. It's like mysterious. It's like a lot of desire, but it's also backward, and that's what they're operating on. It's not actually what it's like because they've never studied what Muslims are like. It's the imaginative discourse of Orientalism. It's like a whole other plane of knowledge, separate from actual evidence knowledge. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I think even in that, it's important to understand that, because there's one, I think with anything, it's always easy to judge from the outside and to really get a grasp, especially when you have, like, we're all speaking English, the globalized societies and the globalized world, we're all subjected to English. And so you don't, especially when you have like books already written about your culture and heritage, it's done through a perspective of the white man. And so you have the English language, because like we know even in language in of itself, um, with local customs and traditions of different people from different countries, you know, their language is able to express ideas differently in a unique manner that perhaps the English language wouldn't be able to. And so when the white man is already judged the language to be backwards and, unappealing and pointless in that manner, they've already reduced that kind of culture to in a box. And then when you have the white guy writing about them in a certain way as well, it's always going to be through their own lens without actually taking into consideration the kind of like, especially like it could be even like Aboriginal history. It could be um, it could be any history, if anything, like even like Indian culture, Indian history. Like it's always going to be done through a certain way and perspective, and sometimes like especially in the Muslim, we see it as in Muslim white people in academia who write about Islam in a very like you know bad manner. It's doing it from a certain lens because they want to portray it as that, and they want to show themselves. at the West, and it's kind of like Jordan Peterson sort of does that, which is really interesting in some ways. And that's the discourse where we have to peel those layers, because the whole framework in of itself is coming from a certain place, and some people like don't find that aspect out. They kind of go down a different line, but it's about getting to the heart of the issue.
Yeah, yeah, bro. I think Jordan Peterson would be a perfect example of someone who like actually knows nothing about Islam, like zero, like he's never studied it. Like all that exists are the Orientalist assumptions in his head that he's received through culture and academia. Like you see when he speaks about it, he actually doesn't know what he's saying. He's like, yeah, they're very, very different type of people. Do you get what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's very general. Like I watched the clips where he discusses it.
and
Um,
he kept saying Islamic culture. I'm just like, what does
yeah,
that even mean?
it's very
Like, what does that
it's
even
just
mean?
the Orientalist discourse he has in his head. Like he doesn't know any real details of anything. So yeah, bro, his interview with Sheikh Hamza Keen. When is it? Do you know?
I think it's end of this month. We'll do an episode,
Oh,
inshallah. So like, I've already
let's
set
do a
this,
live
bro.
breakdown.
Yeah, yeah. So like, Saudi is like, me and Saudi basically locked it down. Like, yeah, we're gonna keep that day free. As soon as the episode releases, we'll watch it, make notes, and then do an episode straight after, inshallah. So that's the plan.
That's crazy. Oh, so
Yeah,
you're gonna take notes first. You gotta watch it, like
yeah,
thoroughly study it, and
yeah.
then yeah,
Unpack
that'd
it.
be good. I
Yeah,
wouldn't mind being on that end
yeah, yeah. Well, plan is like all of us and
because yeah, you have to proper study it. Be like, this is what they're saying. Yeah, yeah, because that's a iconic moment in sort of Sheikh Hamza into Western intellectual history.
it might be like
That
the biggest like Muslim.
the two giants of this, not this ummah, but like of the West, two giants of the West, the Islamic white scholar and the Christian white scholar. She's not Christian, the Western white scholar. Um, what they bring to the table, how they discuss things, what their perspectives are. Because they're both like 60 plus. That means the sages, the wisest you're going to get, um, the most senior you're going to get. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a good listening experience.
It's probably going to be like the biggest. I think it's going to be one of the top podcasts to listen to, in the sense of like within the Ummah, interacting with another big figure within like the Western culture. Like I can't think of many. Like I don't know, like Sheikh Hamza is one of the Yasser Qadi, and like some big figure from the West. I don't know, like a Ben Shapiro, like a
Biggest, yeah, next biggest is
JP. Like
Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. It's like up there. It's Poirier versus McGregor 4. It's actually Sheikh Hamza versus Peterson. That's what it
bro,
is.
they're gonna agree with each other, bro. The politics are the same. Why are you saying bro? It's gonna be a tag team match, bro. It's like them two
Yeah,
versus the Pomo homos.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm keen for Sheikh Hamza to like go a bit further into detail about some of his ideas because you never see it.
But it could,
But
I
yeah,
don't know, like it could go different ways. It could be like an argument about theology specifically. But if it gets into politics, I think this is gonna be agreement. Like,
oh,
yeah,
GG, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
like yeah,
I'd
the
want to see both, to be honest, because like I want to see them talk about theology, but also their take on like the current Western culture, SJW, alt right, what they have to say. Um, yeah, it'd definitely be good
yeah, like
because
gotta take personal responsibility, this, that, like
yeah,
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 yeah.
hectic.
Hopefully, it's just not an agreement fest, just like no content.
It
But yeah,
probably
we'll
will
see.
be.
Then it's like a dozen articles why Sheikh Hamza is, as everyone's going to bash him like straight up, like because I feel like he's clickbait. Like Sheikh is like, oh, Sheikh Hamza, like there's something bad about him, like because people always write like articles about how he's let the community down. Uh, I guess he has in some ways, but it's always sensationalist. I feel like you got to look deeper into what he's saying. But yeah, yeah. Hopefully,
Bro,
it's not a letdown.
you know that video I did with Uthman, episode I did with Uthman a while back, and I clipped a few moments from that episode. One of them was Hamza Yusuf and Jordan Peterson. You
Oh yeah,
see
yeah.
that?
I saw that. Saw that. Yeah, yeah.
Let me pull that up. So I think the views have gone up for that video like recently, like quite a bit, because it's on 7.6K views, right? And bro, and I did this video years ago. So the thumbnail is full, like one half of it is Hamza Yusuf, picture of Hamza Yusuf, and the other half is Jordan Peterson. So it looks like full, like they're discussing something, but they're not.
Yeah,
I
it's
just
the
like
trailer.
I want to actually I might re-upload that video again to like YouTube and act like trailer for the Hamza Yusuf Jordan Peterson episode. But it's just Uthman
Yeah,
breaking down the
trailer.
politics.
Yeah,
Yeah, so then yeah, like a lot of backlash if you read the comments, bro, on that video. It's pretty funny. But it's funny because like we already like unpacked the parallels. It's like they're both going on the same show. They're gonna be talking to each other. So I find that really crazy. Like subhanallah, bro. That's the sign that boys in the cave are on the hawk, bro. It's a sign.
yeah,
Hey, what do you think about actually? This is a good convo. About activism, right? So remember we had a big back and forth on WhatsApp about activism on Instagram specifically as well, and the comments I made during the
oh
past
yeah,
time when it started becoming like more mainstream on the news and stuff. What do you think of this? Is my analyses, right? So there was like 5 or 8 years ago, right? There was like a very like a lot of a big segment of the Muslim community was like very moderate, like moderate Muslims. Like, oh look, the West is great because like you have I don't know Centrelink or whatever, and they're really nice. And look, they're giving us a place to live. Why are you complaining so much? Be grateful. Like our Deen teaches to be make
yeah,
us be grateful. Subhanallah. Like why follow Islam for once? Like and they kind of talk about it also like, oh yeah, just like be nice to the police, they're great and they're doing the best for us. Okay, they're trying to do the best we can. So they're very like super moderate. And now there's like this shift happening where it's like everyone's jumped on this kind of uh, you know activism, BLM, let's go rally protests, fight for justice. It's all like turned so quickly for me, from my observation. I've got like that's kind of my observation. Do you agree with that? Do you think there's been large segment of the community, not even just like not even limited to the Muslim community? I think the wider community in some ways as well.
yeah. I don't feel like it's a bad thing necessarily because it's like, alhamdulillah, at least that generation is getting access to different viewpoints because our previous generations never had that. Because yeah, like I guess like in Australia, Western culture generally, there's like the boomer generation, like super conservative, sort of like rigid in their views. Then there's a parents' generation, Generation X, like sort of corporate, sort of like career forward, but still doesn't get it, like very politically like illiterate, like will just do what the media tells them and believe it. But our generation is like they know the news is bullshit, like as in not true, and they look for alternative forms of media, which is I guess flourishes on Instagram. And there's like the infographics and people posting stories of like this is the truth, don't believe media. So like as in that's good in a way. Obviously like people like switch up real quick as soon as the popular tide moves, but in this case I feel like the move has been towards the good, overall um, perspective. Obviously like the whole Islam question is a separate thing. Like, are you coming at it from a religious perspective? Do you like inject that into it at all, or is it just like a cultural thing for you that you're going with what's happening right now? But yeah, it's sort of like the thing right now.
I
I don't
think
I don't have a problem with it.
I do because I think when it comes to politics, if you're jumping from one camp to another real quick, I think it's going to be problematic because I don't. It shows if you have that kind of political maturity to. It's like virtue
Yeah, true.
signaling.
It's a
Like
it's a
it's like
it's a maturity thing. Yeah,
you
yeah, for
won't
sure, for
you
sure.
won't know like okay, do you actually understand the actual things that is happening? Obviously, they'll understand like injustice is happening and they're trying to fight for that, and from their perspective, they're trying to do the right thing, right? But in saying that, it's like they're jumping hard too fast, where it's like they don't actually understand the underlying, like for example, unpacking like the sort of discussions we've had. It's like it's almost like some sort of grounding that it's needed as well to navigate the spaces, because it's like sometimes they jump into those spaces, but then they have their moderate baggage, if that makes sense. Like that kind of moderate perception of seeing things. It's like it's just manifesting in that space of activism,
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure, for
nothing's really
sure.
changed. Like I'll give you an example. It's like the whole. You say you don't have a problem with this, but I see the problem because I've also like seen it a lot prevalent in Clubhouse. It's like um, people
Bro,
that have
Clubhouse.
issues
Some of the conversations are just bad. They're just. I get what you mean. It's very low tier. It's not. Yeah,
like the whole just like even if you just say oh Palestine's a Muslim issue, if you're like a Muslim and or you're non-Muslim and you have an issue with that, like it like eats you up from the inside. I think it's like if you're more worried about what others feel about when you say that, and you're only trying to look at it from the perspective of oh like I want to make everyone feel included, right? It's like a you know what I'm saying? It's like that perspective. It's like you're not already understanding the politics. Like, why are you trying to jump into this space thinking trying to help? You're actually like, if anything, exacerbating an issue because of your baggage from your moderate politics. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I guess people like me, you, so and the boys. Some of the boys, anyway. We've been discussing Islam, politics, race, this and that since like day dot, since like early uni, like 5, 6, 7 years now. So it's sort of like we understand the different perspectives and waves the community has gone through in coming to this knowledge. Um, it's like what Yasir says. Like there's been a lot of hard fought battles to come to this sort of more radical understanding, like questioning, like Israel and stuff. Like say 10, 15 years ago, it was like unthinkable. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a
And
lot of
Said was writing about it back then. It's like, why is it suddenly popping off now if they're trying to act like they're into like woke
yeah, yeah. A lot of
stuff?
people did the hard work. I guess like committed leftists, committed activists in the Muslim community who've been breaking down the discourse for so long that it's finally bearing its fruit in our generation. But our generation, they just get it from Instagram, right? So they don't have all that much depth to it. So it's just like, yeah, Palestine, yeah, I don't know, Sudan, like, um, but in terms of their base, their grounding, it's probably not all there, and they don't understand a lot of issues too deeply. But yeah, I guess from the religious aspect, like, yeah, it's understanding the whole theological side to it as well, or Islamic homelands side to it as well. Yeah, yeah. That we just have to be aware of all the hard work that's been done in changing the discourse in the media, everything, because it wasn't natural before. Like like Saudi was saying, things were much harder like 10, 15 years ago as a Muslim. Like you couldn't keep a beard in the workplace. You couldn't talk about certain things. Otherwise, you'd be looked at as sus. And there was no one offering these alternative perspectives. Like Israel is right. That's the only thing that was accepted in like popular society. And yeah, there was nothing then. Only thing you had was like HT. So you just had like a flag waving anti-West, like America destroying our lands sort of approach, and you had no further nuance. But now it's sort of like a lot more detailed and stuff, and a lot more people with different perspectives, which I think is really beneficial. But yeah, I guess our gen has to recognize the hard work that's went into it.
I don't even mind too much if like the person isn't too knowledgeable. It's more like if they know like who is, if they understand that firstly they admit that they. I think it's about being honest about where your politics is and was like a few years ago and where you are at now. That's what really bugs me. Is like a lot of people they act like they're already on the train years ago, and it's like from that perspective like fine, but at least be honest about your journey, and even in your journey at least um direct uh sort of have someone where you can kind of be like look, I'm more taking advice and from this person, and be honest about who you're looking up to in terms of navigating those political terrains. And so I find that it's almost like that's non-existent, and then that's where the moderate baggage are just kind of shows as well, rather than kind of self-reflecting, being like, okay, um, I'm working through this. I'm not sure, but I know that my previous policies wasn't correct, and that's what like annoys me. And I guess like the counter argument is like, oh look, you have a bigger enemy, which is Israel. Why are you fixating on your own people to, the people who are on your own team to, like, you know combat this issue? But like that, I don't think that's wrong. I guess like that statement, but in saying that, I think it's like a lot of like, I said this on the one path video, but I didn't. They cut it off because they cut a lot of parts off.
Shit.
So I talked about like,
Internalized racism.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just like the racism is come from the Muslim community, right? It's
It's
like
like,
intense, yeah.
be
And so
your
it's
own
like
self. Yeah.
sometimes it's like your own enemies are like people from your own community. And so, especially like as a Muslim growing up, sometimes it's like, why you got a beard? Why don't you shave it? Like, it's like, why are you doing this? It's like, what the heck?
She,
You know what I'm saying?
she. You heard it here first. One path is the enemy. No jokes, but the yeah, they just cut out Tanzim's part, which is pretty devs. But yeah, what did you say there?
It was probably, bro. I actually thought that was my best part of everything I said, but they
Ah,
cut that
devs.
out.
They cut it out. Yeah. What did
Yeah,
you say?
I just pretty much talked about the Islamophobia I endured from people within my own community. Like,
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, and I like, because they were talking about like Islamophobia, and so yeah, like there's that kind of
Oh, bro. They,
like,
so they didn't want the nuance. They just wanted the West Islamophobic towards us
yeah, yeah.
on the day of judgment. Right? Yeah. They
Like,
they don't have the nuance to be like sometimes your own community reinforces it. That's
yeah,
like
yeah,
the big thing.
uphold
Yeah.
that, and it's like you need to eradicate that aspect as well, or else it's like you're
That's probably
fighting.
the more intense and insidious like element, like dealing with it on a day to day basis in your community and your family.
Yeah, 100%. And that's like a huge battle in of itself, right? And that's why I think for me, it's like, even with people that, it's uh, like people who are deemed establish themselves to be on your team, but then they're not on your team. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
gotcha. Yeah, like the community. Yeah, yeah, for
It's
sure,
like
for
a
sure.
double agent. you know,
Yeah,
it's like, dude, like, what the heck are you doing?
right. You were full saying something profound and like getting off your chest to be like, took so much courage to say this, and they just cut it. What the heck? Damn. Yeah,
But yeah,
but yeah.
that's like, not even like, I guess activists within the community experienced that, like from moderate Muslims, like years ago, right? When he was navigating the war on terror narrative. And that's where I think a lot of people are upset with like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, because he made a statement where, for the exact quote, but it was more like, if you don't like it here, you can leave.
Oh
You remember
yeah,
this?
I've heard that. Yeah.
It's like, what
uh,
the heck?
nah, I guess at certain points he was dealing with really ISIS types or really staunch Islamist types, and he didn't word that the best way. But yeah, yeah, it's definitely not the way you should be addressing the issue. But yeah, I don't know, but why he would say that. But yeah,
Uh,
it's sort of the best
it's
discourse.
not. It's like evading from the actual issue, right? So it's like, why do you have to say that? Like, you're
Yeah,
just upholding the structures of the West. You're just kind of like
yeah,
saying, yeah,
literally.
like, it's you that's the problem, not the West or the structures at play. And I guess like for me, that's why it never made sense. Like, this, I guess the Seerah, right, was always about, um, kind of changing the society and the ideas that were strongly embedded into that society. Like, for example, in specifically like tribalism, specifically, the fact of like, um, your lineage as like some massive thing, kufr obviously, and the way that they worship their gods and the way they perceived God, right? Um, like, absolutely, like uprooting all those kind of existing ideas within society and what shaped that society, and absolutely eradicated it, right? Like almost like an anarchist kind of approach to, in that sense, and brought into like the conversation, or brought into that society, like Islamic ideas and ethics, right? And so it's like, that to me is such like a, like, screams activism, like, just trying to change the material condition and the situation. And and even not just that, it's just like the way they treat the poor people and the lower class of society, all those kind of things, and how Rasul some sort of changed that. Like beautiful examples, like Bilal Radian, who was looked down upon was looked down upon by a lot of people when the Quraysh were in charge of pretty much the Kaaba, and it was like on kufr, right? But then he became like the governor, so it's like able to elevate people from that material condition to become like one of the best people in that land, right? So it's like that is what like Islam does. And for me, it's like a lot of the discourse, political discourse I see, it's more like trying to think of, Husnul done for the West for some reason, or like, for example, yeah, like really putting ourselves in the back foot, saying like, oh no, just be nice to them, and they'll see the real Islam. It's like, yeah, sure, like obviously to some degree, like you try to display Islam to the best of your ability, in the best way possible, right, to like normal everyday people. But in that is also another project as well. It's about how to change the society in of itself, right? And also some sort of tactically and politically speaking, made ties with different tribes, brought them all together, um, made them powerful under Islam. Like that kind of conversation is very political. Like the whole Syrian of itself, how it kind of formed, how Islam sort of came together, is very like a political thing, right? And that conversation is just not there for some reason,
Yeah, for sure, for
extinct.
sure. Yeah, that definitely needs to be more present, I guess. But yeah, I've been going through the Seerah as well, and it's very relevant. And yeah, Muslims should definitely look more into it and inject it into their political discussions because there's so many examples which could correlate to the modern day, but we just don't even know it because we've got to study it.
Exactly. How you find? You said you listened to Yasser Qadi. Are you going through it, the Sirah?
Yeah, bro, it's actually amazing. Like, I got up to episode 50, 52, but I wanted to start again so that it gets better into my memory. So I started from episode one again. Now I'm like up to episode four, like just getting it solidified into my mind, like the different lineages of the Arabs, like uh,
Qahtani, Adnani.
Qahtani, Adnani. I'm literally listening to that just then. The Adnanis were the Arabs that came and settled in Arabia, and they became better at Arabic than the
Yeah,
Qahtanis, who were
because
the
they were part
original
of like the
Arabs.
trading routes, and they were like the more of the center of
Yeah, they were
society.
at the
And the
center, and
Qahtani was like south of, or in the southern part, so they weren't as like embedded in society, and so they lost touch with language a bit
and
more.
the Prophet ﷺ is like
So
from
some,
descendants of the Adnani. He's like that's the line of the Quraysh. But yeah, it's crazy and how idolatry first started. What's his name? Uh, I don't know.
um,
Some I forgot the
it's
name.
thing.
Amr ibn al-Luhay.
Ammar bin Luhay. Yeah.
Amr ibn al-Luhay. He just went
Bro,
to
it's like
Syria one day.
Sorry, this is actually a good thing you bring up because it's like a inferiority complex that he had as well. Because he looked to other civilization, look, oh look, they're so big and great, and they're worshiping this god, so I'm gonna bring back this god and make the my people worship it,
It's
right?
crazy how you could just change the entire religion. Like he just brought an idol over from Syria, um, and brought it to Mecca, and then everyone started worshiping that and making copies of it, and then idolatry just flourished and became part of the religion. And yeah, it's crazy because like all idolatries, I guess, are linked and just sort of spread from one another in that way. Because you're just carrying rocks and be like, yeah, this is God, and then it's a bit munted, but
Yeah, and
that's
but that reminded me when I was listening. It reminded me of like people that have this inferiority complex with the West. It's like, oh
yeah. He
look
said
at
that.
the
Yasuka explicitly said
odd.
that it's like inferiority complex towards a Syrian civilization. Forgot the name. The Amalkites or something. He's like, yeah, they're powerful and they're doing this, so we should do the same. I guess the same for the West. Like, you don't need to copy them just because they're powerful. Like, doesn't mean what they do is more correct or more valuable.
Yeah, Allah sort of gives power, like I guess in ways that He wants, right? That doesn't necessarily mean they're correct upon their way, right? So that's really
Yeah,
fascinating to unpack. So yeah, bro, like for me, my next project, inshallah, not project, but I'm trying to like unpack a lot of ideas from the Sirah and understand our current reality and sort of, the ideas that we've read in Edward Said and all that, kind of combine the two. I think there's a lot of like parallels and overlaps in many ways, because I think I've had this conversation before. I'll wrap in a few minutes, but it's like, I guess my point is that, like, because like the neo traditional types, like obviously mashallah, they're very learned and credit,
Neo
yeah,
trads, yeah.
neo trads, like, definitely obviously like well learned and are studied overseas and all that. But then when it comes to politics, they weaponize certain situations of the Seerah according to what they deem to be the correct political movies, and it sort of distorts how Islam sort of goes about
Ooh,
addressing political
what do they
issues.
weaponize? Which parts of the Sierra do they say
Do you
like
want, bro?
this
This
is
is
what the
this is
Prophet
right.
did?
Do you want to know? Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Because I won't mention names because I might get into trouble. But like, one of the aspects is like one prominent scholar in the West, right? Uh, because I might butcher some of the exact quotes that they said, but essentially, they'll make the point. He made the point in a specific lecture that I watched that, because of cancel culture right now and race wars or whatever, how they're trying to depict like, oh, CRT and like racism, or look at like how bad things are.
Yeah.
It's causing divisions apparently, right? And so what they're trying to say is that, look, this is
So they're saying SJW work culture is
yes,
causing divisions,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
CRT is at the basis of all of that. That's why it's
No,
the root
they link it
problem.
to postmodernism.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. So POMO, CRTs, it's all in the wokeism. It's all evil, right?
it's one
But then,
package.
to justify that point, right? They talk about, look at, not justify that point, but kind of add to that point. It's like, they use the example from the Sirah. Oh, look, there was two tribes where they were like fighting, and what happens after Islam came? It's like they're together now. They don't bring up the previous
What?
baggage about situations that they've encountered. Islam. It's about looking forward and building something great and bringing it together.
That's
I'm like,
the wars of Jahiliyyah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's basically trying to say that. So he's trying to link the race wars now, like the CRT Pomo Homo thing, as like, bro. If I'll mention the name, you'll get a heart attack because it's like someone very prominent. Um, kind of links them all in the same basket, right? But the thing is because it's such a prominent sheikh, it's like, I don't know, it's like people that are like sort of normal sort of Muslims will look to that and be like, yeah, yeah, because it's like he's using the seerah, he's connecting the seerah to this, and it sounds legit. You know what I mean? But it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
weaponizing Islam in a way where it justifies his kind of ideological underpinnings, or how he reads politics. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's kind of I find it a bit disturbing, to be honest. Like, it's actually like pretty scary that he's doing that, because you can even have this discussion with like misogyny, right? Like, you can justify aspects of Islam in a way where it's like, oh, you're perpetuating misogyny, right? And you see a lot of it from like very traditional brothers as well, and I've experienced it as well. It's like, oh no, but I'm speaking for Islam, but it's like very like disgusting way of perceiving women. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, exactly,
you can kind
exactly.
of latch onto aspects of Islam and kind of portray in a way it's like, oh, you're speaking for Islam. It's like it links with Orientalism, right? It's like Edward Said's like, the West speaks in behalf of the East, right? But like, I guess some trats try to, the way they use Islam, it's like they're trying to speak for Islam, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are. You know what I mean? It's more like they're just trying to justify their preconceived notions of things. You get what I'm saying? So
The
like, I don't know. For example,
the
yeah, sorry.
go on. Yeah, go on.
No, I was just saying, like, for example, the war on terror narrative. People are like, oh, just be a better Muslim and give dawah, and it's like, oh, look, you have to be good to our neighbors, and this is all part of Islam, so like you should all do that. But then it's fitting into a political narrative of being like a moderate in some ways, a moderate in society, or a secular Muslim in some ways. Just keep like Islam to
Yeah,
yourself and just be good and show outwardly that you're decent, but not really talking about changing the conditions or changing society as a whole, from an activist perspective, which is like clear in the Sirah anyway. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, that's why I think it's really important to have that mix of like, that's why I want to do like a thorough sort of going through this. Like, I'm on my third basically list, third time I'm going through Yasir Qadhi Sirah now. Like, I've gone through it twice fully. I'm already third. I'm like up to episode roughly 10 now. Third time doing it. So I want to like unpack that, connect it back to what I already know, to more as like evidence based. But because there is a lot of principles and overlaps, 100%. Like I'm already seeing it. I make notes of it, like when I listen
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, yeah. I really need to make notes. Like, there's been numerous examples where he said Allah has used a non-Muslim to further Islam. Mut'im ibn Adi,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he
Huge
was the one
example. Yeah,
that offered protection to the Prophet ﷺ to come back into Mecca from the sanctions, I think, on the Quraysh. And then, like, no one else would do it, but he did it. But he didn't die on Islam, so he's died a mushrik, but he still really helped Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, like, made note of it. It's like he, like, put him on a high status, be like, he would have released all the prisoners of war from Badr for, like, no price if Mutim ibn Adi had just even mentioned it. He's like saying this person was really, like, really highly valued for them. But I guess with the CRT thing, you'd have to look at examples of where the Prophet ﷺ learned from the Quraysh. There's examples though, I don't know, like Hudaybiyah possibly is like, this is a noble document. I don't know what he said. Like, I'm totally butchering that because I haven't come across that part yet. But it's like, I agree with what's in this document. What an agreement drawn up by the other mushrikeen, I guess, or the
no, like
pre-Islamic
can't you just talk
poetry.
about Hilful Fudul and the other battle? Because Rasul Sam later on kind of in Hilful Fudul, where the situation was that a traveler came to Mecca and sold something to, I forgot which Qurayshi leader, and the Qurayshi leader didn't end up paying him back, and so the that war started happening because of that. And there's the Fijar wars as well. This all happened before the advent of Islam, but Rasul Sallam was involved in it. And so even in
Oh
that,
yeah. Okay,
yeah,
okay. I totally forgot
and
about that
then
part.
Rasul
Yeah.
Sallam, like years later, is like sort of says, yeah, like those were good causes, and he didn't say like he was wrong in participating in it. He was actually saying like, yeah, it was a just cause in that.
Okay. That means
So
there was justice before Islam.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
there's
And
justice from other sources.
yeah, yeah, 100%, right? And not only just that, bro, it's just from like I guess temperamental perspective. Some temperaments already inclined towards justice anyway, so it's not like something that it's like obviously like Islam, theologically speaking, Allah is just. So then whatever I guess Allah sort of reveals through the Quran and Sunnah and stuff, this is what we should follow. Like, there's no doubting that for sure. But then there's the kind of fitra argument. There's the whole kind of temperament argument to talk about these just things that are just, right? But even in saying that, I guess, but I don't see that. I don't know why how the critical race theory kind of overlaps with this. Like for me, it's just I use it as a tool to kind of understand the reality we're in now. So it's like
Yeah.
a tool of understanding, and because we're living in Western, society and laws in a way where it's not like favoring minority communities and all that. So but yeah, like if you're going into concept of justice and all that in fighting for just causes, then yeah, for sure that's already happened. Rasul did that, and yeah, like there's examples of that as well, which is really interesting. So that's what I mean. Like these examples aren't going to be highlighted as much by some certain people with a different political persuasion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something that needs to be looked into further because I guess you can't dismiss certain, like, knowledges without being explicitly from the Quran. There's no explicit evidence against drawing from other intellectual resources, right? It's people just like, we don't need it, we just need Islam. So it's a bit like, yeah, like, but
Like
whereas from the Seerah, you can see explicitly like how, like, he recognized justice in other sources and stuff like that as well. So there's probably a lot to say about that.
yeah, there's a lot, like even with drawing from other sources and other modes of knowledge, like even throughout Islamic history, like us using Byzantine laws, us using Greek philosophy, us using philosophy, different ideas like languages, four temperaments, like all of these knowledges, like Islamic scholars like utilized and embraced and took on, is like very very evident for anyone, and it's nothing you can kind of get away from. If anything, like it's part of our deen in some ways, right? So it's like, yeah, that conversation never makes sense to me. And someone tries to kind of picture this whole idea of Islam and non-Islam. It's like you take from whatever's like correct, and once you've looked into it, right, and you use it and you extract from the gold from it, you know,